The White House Digital Assets Working Group just released what's being called the most comprehensive crypto policy blueprint to date. At over 160 pages, the report lays out how the U.S. plans to integrate blockchain technology into its financial infrastructure, aiming for global leadership in digital finance. The recommendations cover stablecoin regulation, DeFi compliance frameworks, and even formal recognition of Bitcoin as a strategic reserve asset. But what does this really mean for Bitcoin? We're going to unpack that right now. Hi, I'm Nate Martin, and this is the Bitcoin Effect. Today we're taking a close look at the White House's new digital assets report, how it frames Bitcoin, and what it reveals about the path forward for Bitcoiners. The report highlights, first, the Clarity Act gives CFTC oversight of Bitcoin spot markets. Banks are being urged to reopen innovation hubs to explore Bitcoin custody services. The Genius Act enforces reserve requirements and federal licensing for stablecoin issuers. A strategic Bitcoin reserve is being established, initially seeded with seized assets. And the report emphasizes stronger AML enforcement and coordinated oversight among federal agencies. Regulatory clarity might reduce friction that's kept institutions out of Bitcoin markets. If the CFTC steps in, we could see federally regulated Bitcoin spot markets. We're not talking about ETFs here. We're talking about offering direct access to Bitcoin under clear national guidelines. And that's something that exchanges and institutions have been waiting on for years. But banking modernization brings its own set of questions. Allowing banks to offer Bitcoin custody services may expand exposure, but it risks reinforcing old habits of trusting third parties to hold assets. For those of us focused on Bitcoin as sovereign money, self-custody isn't a preference, it's the point. Stablecoin regulation is another area where alignment isn't guaranteed. The Genius Act pushes for reserve-backed licensed stablecoins, which could clean up bad actors, but this also positions stablecoins as a compliant government-approved digital dollar, sounding suspiciously like a privately contracted CBDC, a product designed to feel familiar and convenient. The real risk here isn't that stablecoins overshadow Bitcoin. It's that people are being sold around Bitcoin's purpose. The narrative being framed is subtle but deliberate. Bitcoin is portrayed as the interesting experiment, while stablecoins are positioned as the practical solution. In doing so, they shift Bitcoin to the margins, treating it as the distraction, while the real focus becomes preserving the familiar system, just with a digital facelift. But the inflationary structure remains. The control remains. And the problem that Bitcoin was designed to solve remains ignored. If you find this breakdown helpful, where we explore how digital asset policies are developing and what they mean for Bitcoin, consider giving this video a like. It helps us keep the conversation going. Continuing on. Now, when it comes to DeFi, the report takes a hard look at how much control these protocols really have. It's asking who can change the code, who makes decisions, and can these projects fit into existing compliance rules? While this might bring certain projects into the fold, it also risks nudging them toward centralization simply to survive. For Bitcoiners, this isn't just about DeFi, it's about the broader precedent of how decentralization gets treated under regulatory scrutiny. And it raises a bigger question. How does a government regulate decentralization when it's already happening outside its borders? Which brings us to the bigger picture. Where does this leave us? This report marks a shift in how policymakers view Bitcoin. It's no longer being ignored, it's being accounted for. But as Bitcoin becomes part of broader financial strategies, we need to separate true adoption from what's often labeled as adoption. Offering custodial services or investment products might increase Bitcoin exposure, but exposure is not adoption. Adoption happens when individuals take custody of their Bitcoin, validate their own transactions, and participate in a system that operates without intermediaries. Well, that's the heart of it. Here's how I see it. Exposure is not adoption. Self-custody defines Bitcoin adoption. Vigilance means educating and building, and Bitcoin doesn't need permission. It emerged and operated well before governments even took notice, so it certainly doesn't need their approval to keep doing exactly that. For Bitcoiners, the task ahead remains the same. Continue educating, continue advocating for self-custody, and continue building systems that preserve Bitcoin's true attributes, regardless of how the regulatory landscape evolves. Adoption is not a numbers game. It's about fostering an understanding of what Bitcoin allows individuals to do, not just how institutions can package it. That's it for this edition of The Bitcoin Effect. We'll see you next time.